And that was like Braveheart shit right there, right? That was like, yeah, we're going to die on this hill kind of thing, right?
Welcome, high-performing entrepreneurs and business owners. Do you suffer from shiny object syndrome? Do you often feel scattered and distracted, making it hard to implement your plan with all the ideas and strategies coming at you? Do you often wonder if you have the right goals and plan? Welcome to Extraordinary Focus with David Wood, where we help you achieve way more in less time. Get the laser focus you need so you can double your business, double your impact in the world, and be an even more extraordinary entrepreneur and human. Let's dive in and stay tuned at the end for your gift. Welcome everybody to another episode of Extraordinary Focus. I am joined by Bill Gallagher in this interview, and I'm excited. I'll tell you why. I'm going to read his bio and then I'm going to add some personal things and then we'll get him out here. Bill Gallagher is a business coach and master facilitator with over 30 years of experience, entrepreneurial and executive. He spent the last 15 years coaching and training others in leadership and performance, and previously led 4 companies of his own and has been a partner or executive in 2 others. Bill discovered the Rockefeller habits and scaling up 20 years ago and has used them in his own companies. Let's get him out here. Welcome to the show, Bill Gallagher.
Thanks for having me on. It's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to add some personal notes. I have a feeling that you and I have been connected vaguely going back 25 years when I was first getting into coaching back in 1998. I have this story that you've been around the ICF and I've just seen the name. And then more recently we spoke, we got on a call, and I could hear in your speaking, I could hear power. And I was like, wait, have you done the landmark? Were you a landmark leader of some sort? And I don't know if I knew that from the past or it was just how you were showing up. So, ladies and gentlemen, this guy is someone that you want to listen to. And I got a feeling we could talk about any topic under the sun and we'd still get value because it's how you show up in the world, Bill.
That's really, really flattering. And even if that wasn't true, we're just going to act as if it was.
Yes. Yes, why not?
Really, really flattering. Thank you very much. And I think that's largely accurate. So I'm always happy to talk to you. You have a playful, but thoughtful, intelligent style, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. And I did write down the word play as I was looking you up and doing a little research. You had playful on your page about you, so maybe we'll get to geek out on play a little bit. I know you've got something called the Leadership Flywheel. I'm very interested in leadership since I realized that we all need to lead ourselves to begin with, and then how do you get other people to do stuff that you think is going to be cool? So I love that topic. And you mentioned to me on a call we had a while back about playing small. You said that's just going to keep you small. And that's been niggling at me. And I want to ask you, and bring in the Leadership Flywheel anytime you want, what are some ways that we do play small and keep ourselves small in the world? And how do we overcome that?
Well, a lot of things like this are fear-based, and that shows up in the second piece, the second discipline of our leadership flywheel, that we call engaging. And in engaging, we're really looking at getting people to say yes to something and begin acting on it, right? So if we're in a conversation, there's something there that we're excited about. Now I want you to actually commit and act against something in that interaction. So whether it's selling, hiring, partnering, purchasing, like any number of things where we want commitment and action, there is playing small, playing safe, right? Why would we do that? We do that because we're afraid of getting rejection. We're afraid of being overwhelmed. We're afraid of any number of things. It's a fear-based way to play it safe. So we play small. We don't go for what we really want. We don't even speak what we really want because we don't want to look foolish. We don't want to, right? Fear of looking bad. there are all kinds of things like that that we do, and that's one of the things that when we're working with leaders, we want them to overcome that, to stretch, to get a little uncomfortable, to see the the area of discomfort as opportunity for themselves, as a great place to like lean into, a place of power.
I really like that. I hadn't made the connection between playing small and keeping myself small and not speaking up. I was thinking, oh, well, maybe I'm not, growing the business at the rate I want to, or maybe I'm not going for this or going for that. But just not speaking up and saying, hey, this is what I want. Or
Well,
speaking up and saying, this is what I don't want.
yeah, let me share a little story with you. This is very real, very personal, but I spent a lot of time in Hawaii as a kid growing up. And I was a surfer, and we lived on the North Shore for part of that time. And we had a student living with us in the house at different points. And at one point, we had this young Australian guy living with us, and he was also a surfer, but he was like 5 years older than me. And I was probably 11 years old, 10 or 11 years old at the time. A little unclear on the exact year and age, but right in there. And John comes and he's like, "Hey, Kalani." My family called me Kalani. I was known as Kalani as a boy. Do you want to go out and surf Waimea? Now, Waimea at the time, like today, we have Jaws, and we have places in Portugal and things like that are even bigger. But at the time, Waimea was about the biggest place that you thought of, and it was very close to my house for like huge surf. And it doesn't really start breaking until it's really, really big. And it's a very kind of an ominous place. So I was terrified, but also really excited. And I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't do that. And he's like, come on, it's going to be all right. It's not that big today. It's just like the beginning of where Waimea breaks in the winter, and you could do this. And so this guy that I look up to, an adult, right? A young adult. But in my world, it's like, come on, you're going to do it. I'm there with you. We're going to be together. It's going to be okay. So I get my board, and he gets his board, and we get in his car, and we drive out to Waimea, and I paddle out with him. And I would see a big wave, and the waves there are they big, and and they have kind of a different shape than like a little reef break that you might see in a place where it like pops up and breaks all of a sudden. Anyway, I'd see these waves, and I'd get so scared I'd paddle way outside, and then I couldn't catch them. And then I'd be like, oh, damn, and I missed it. I wasn't at the right spot. So then I'd paddle back in to get the next one. But then I'd see another one. Anyway, I paddled back and forth for 2 hours, scared the whole time. And I didn't catch a single wave that day. But I learned something about like going for things that are big and terrifying, and that leaving you feeling alive, and feeling like you grew and stretched something, right? And I think it's really powerful. Like, it'd probably be a better story if I'd actually caught an amazing wave and it was epic and all that. But the fact that I didn't maybe is really great. Like, you're going to go and play at things that are big and intimidating, and it may not actually work out. But who you know yourself to be as a result of playing a bigger game and going for what you really want is awesome. And when John invited me that day, and he said, come on, you could do this, right? He was speaking to a bigger future version of myself than the way I presented myself, the way that I actually was for myself in the moment. And that's pretty cool too, right? Like, he was like, come on, man, you're going to do it's your time.
Wow, there's so much I want to unpack from that. It does seem a powerful story. Not catching a wave, Firstly, you were out there. You got yourself out there and you paddled around, right? That was the beginning, and then maybe there's a lesson in, hey, if I'd really gone for it, I could have caught a really great wave, and I didn't. I just kept going backwards and forwards and whatever. So I could draw a lesson from that. But you said something very powerful in there. I want to write it down. Who you know yourself to be as a result of X. What can you complete that? Who you know yourself to be.
Yeah. So there's a way that we think of ourselves, and moment by moment, for most of us, most of the time, it's a pretty fixed thing. I am a certain way. And even if we haven't put words to it, if I say, like, who are you? What sort of person are you? You have a whole bunch of thoughts. I'm like this, I'm not like that, right? But when you do something new and different, something challenging, who you know yourself to be changes. More recently, one of my friends, actually one of our, I think also John Ratliff. Um, do you know John? No,
I don't think so.
John's also in the Mavericks community, and John, I saw John do stand up comedy, and I looked at John do that, and I thought, oh, that was pretty funny, and that's cool. I bet I could do better than John, and but I've never done this thing, so I signed up and hired a coach to work on comedy, and I went with this guy Matt Kazam, who you might also know. And Matt taught comedy, coached comedy, taught you how to write. He coached me through developing a thing, and then he put me in a stand-up showcase at a place called Caroline's, a big comedy club in New York. And I went and I did like a 15-minute set of stand-up
15 minutes. That's a lot for a first time gig.
comedy. It
That's a
is a
long
lot.
time.
And it is also among the most terrifying things I've done in my life. And I'm really comfortable as a public speaker, but a public speaker with a certain style and like distance. And I don't even mind like being funny, but to be intentionally funny every minute for 15 and against a scripted pre-planned thing rather than just some off the cuff irreverent kinds of things that I like to say, like that was a whole different thing. I was terrified. I was so like out of I'm like, oh, I did a couple shots of vodka. I cranked my music. I'm like, I was worried I was going to choke. I was going to forget things. But who I knew myself to be at the end of that 15 minutes was forever altered. The kind
Wow.
of freedom that I gave myself out of that experience to like just go for it, to be silly, to be whatever was greatly expanded because I did that.
Yeah, love that. And I'm not surprised to find that we share this experience. I I've been speaking for a long time too, and I went and did a stand-up comedy course, and then I did a showcase, and went on to do 20 gigs, actually, and it was terrifying. One of the most terrifying things I've ever done is trying to be funny. Like, yeah, make me laugh funny, man. Particularly when people have not paid. You got to do it at a professional comedy club where people are paid. You do it at a pub where people are trying to eat and there's a show going on as well. That's so much harder. But yeah, like who we know ourselves to be after doing that is pretty amazing. And you said it was forever altered. So what's an example in the workplace? What's an example of something where I might be nervous to speak up and be real with my team, that either I'm leading or I'm part of, and yet if I were to go for it, who I know myself to be could be altered.
Well, right. So there's a whole world of things that we don't say all the time. Some of which is probably a really good idea. Some of which should stay inside your head.
Right.
There are things that are only serving you of not of interest or whatever. But there are right like things that are weird and like maybe like that's for a different audience. So I don't think you should just remove all self edit, and just like start vomiting on everyone because there's not necessarily any contribution to anyone in that. But there are things that are really relevant to say, things that you really are hungry to say to a particular group, audience, team, like whatever, that you don't actually say because you're afraid, because you're worried, because there's something else running the show and that you don't have a lot of room for. So, for example, um, and this goes to that first piece of the leadership flywheel, the inspiring bit. So years ago, I had taken over as CEO of a business that my wife had founded, and I was all lit up and excited about this, except we had some real business problems, and I didn't exactly know how to solve them. I didn't really know the industry or whatever. And like a year later, the bank comes to me, our bank, who has by my line of credit and my long-term debt, and says, listen, we want to close all these things. You're in violation of the covenants of the loans and you need to find a new bank. And I'm like, oh, I can't find a new bank right now because the financials aren't so good. And like, there were a lot of reasons I couldn't do that right then. I said, okay, well, then you should shut down the business and you should sign over your house. And so I saw the business failing, myself losing my house. And then I had a whole other thought about that, which is, if I fail at this and we lose the business and the house, my whole life will come apart and my wife will leave me and I'll become a weekend dad.
Yeah.
And that was like the worst thing that, I could imagine at the time. Being that absentee dad and all that, that was horrifying to me. So that's what I really feared. Now, I didn't have an answer for this. So for the next couple weeks, I suffered with this alone and in silence without telling anyone. My wife knew, but not the people who could help me fix it, the people on our team. So I thought about instead in my conversation with her, I thought about two things. One, was there anything I could do to fix it? I didn't have any good ideas. The other thing was, how could I survive it, or like what could I do so that I could survive what seemed like the certain failure of this business and the loss of my house and not lose my family? So that's what I thought about, like how to reinvent something, how to move on to something else, how to whatever, how to avoid that thing I was worried about that wasn't like right in the foreground. And, but I wasn't going to my team, right, and talking about that thing that you were talking about transparency, about all of that. So my wife, Lori, her name's Lori, said to me, he said, okay, listen, if the business fails, even if we lose the house, I'm not leaving you over that.
Oh,
Right?
wow.
She said, we could go live with my parents. We could do
Oh,
lots of things. We could start over, but that's not why I'll leave you. She said, you lie to me, you do some other crazy shit. Like you intentionally screw it up. Well, that's a different conversation, but but this is not something that,
I
you're
just felt relief flood through my whole body hearing that.
right.
Yeah.
She also said, listen, we could also start over. Like we could do something else. We've got our lives ahead of us. We have stuff now. We have kids.
Oh,
What are we going to do? And she said, but is that the example you want to set for your kids? They're really young at this point, right? They're only like, I forget how old they were at that point, but only like one was a few years old, like preschool. The others maybe in kindergarten or just almost there. And she said, is that the example you want to set, the story you want to leave for them? And I was just completely overcome. I was like, no, I want to teach them to fight. So now I had an interesting thing. So now I've decided in that moment that what there is for me to do is fight, but I still don't know what to do. I still don't have a plan. So I'm like, okay, what is there that I'm not doing? What is it? And that's when I realized I've got to go and talk to the team. So I went to our team and I said, hey guys, there's a problem. We're at risk of being put out of business. The bank wants to shut us down. I don't have a plan. And I was pretty emotional as I shared this with them. I was really like right on the edge of being a failure out loud in front of my team. And I said, listen, you may need to quit and move on to take care of your families and to do what you need to do. And I totally understand if that's what you've got to do. So, but I could really use your help. And I don't know what to tell you at this point, but I can only promise you two things. I will not quit. I will fight to the end till the sheriff locks the door and kicks us out and does all that. And that was like Braveheart shit right there, right? That was like, yeah, we're going to die on this hill kind of thing, right?
right.
And I will be really honest with you. I will lay it all out. And together, maybe we could figure something out. Here's a cool thing about that. So that was like really, that's the most memorable, transparent thing I could think of in a business context. Nobody quit. People are like, let's see. I love this. Like, let's play this game. Let's go fight the bank, So nobody quit. And together, we actually came up with the solution. We produced a big breakthrough. We took the bank out. We changed the business around. The next year, we had our best year ever, up in cash, profit, everything. And we didn't have the bank around our neck anymore. And I kept the house and I kept my thing. And I was really proud of, not of myself. I mean, I was proud of myself, but I was really proud of us together, right? That team. But it started with that, like, deep vulnerability, transparency. People are like, oh, I'm afraid to cry in front of my team. I'm afraid to say that I don't have a plan. That's not good leadership. Bullshit. That's great leadership. That's bold and courageous. That takes an extraordinary amount of strength. That's one of the strongest moments of my professional life, to stand in front of the team and say, I don't have all the answers, but I think
Wow.
we could, tackle this.
Yeah. Can we include that story in the book?
Sure.
That I love this story, and what's that?
I've told it many times. I'm happy to talk about it
Well,
again. It's really useful, powerful, right?
I love it, and I want to double click on some of the elements here that I got. So, firstly, you had a fear about your wife leaving you, and you shared that. In my language, you named that mouse. And I figure, worst case, you get reality on something you were already worried about, and you find out, oh, it's true. She will, that's worst case. Best case, what you got, what I heard was partnership. You got partnership out of that. She's with me. We're doing this together.
Yeah.
Bold. Even if it stops right there. Then she helped you create the possibility of you being a model for your kids. That came out of you being transparent. And you decided, I want to fight. That's what I want to show my kids. So I'm inspired by that. I got goosebumps on my legs. Then you brought your team into it, and it seems to me like you created the possibility of collaboration. Like, we're gonna do this together if you want. I invite you, and they decided they were in on it. So it seems like you inspired them because they wanted to be on that hill with you. And then, as a pure bonus, that's the way I see it. At the end of all this, as a pure bonus, you turn the business around, and the business was successful. But you already had all that other stuff. Even if you went down in flames, who you were was a success story, right? And the bonus was, hey, in time and space, we made the business rock as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I love that story. What's an example of where you think it would not be appropriate to be transparent and you're just going to decide to keep it to yourself in a work context? Or more than one example?
Well, so something that's intensely personal that they don't need to know about. So I don't want to know too much about your politics, your religion. I don't want to know about your sexual preferences in detail, right? If it's about your identity, if you're gay or straight or trans or something like that, and then it might be useful. But the specific taste that you have within those worlds, we don't want to know about that in a business context, right? So
Right.
what's appropriate in that kind of thing it has to do with what's there. Without suppressing yourself, it's knowing when is the communication for you in your head part of some self-absorbed nonsense, or when is it actually really relevant to this community, this team, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I just went to my life and I thought, what's an example of something that might be too personal and inappropriate in many relationships? And I'll say it right here on a public forum. I've done a lot of exploration into BDSM. I've been fascinated by power dynamics and the fun two consenting people can have, or more than two people. And that's the kind of thing in a work setting, particularly where I had a power dynamic. Let's suppose I'm the boss, and I don't want the person feeling uncomfortable with me sharing, with stuff like that. It's not needed, but I could see if it's a peer, and we're out having drinks, and maybe they've shared something a little personal, and I want to have a deeper connection. Yeah, maybe. See, I might even say, look, I could share about this, but if that's too weird, we'll just skip it. I had one person working for me who was very open in so many ways. None of that fazed her. She loved knowing about everything. So yeah, I guess it's where appropriate. Hide nothing does not mean share everything.
Yes. You also make the other person responsible for certain things. So if I share something with you, I'm open about something that's not generally like open and all part of the full public record. Now you're responsible for knowing what to do with that, for carrying that information. And I've asked you, I've put you in that position without necessarily saying, hey, so you committed a great crime. You might want to talk to an attorney about that and not have that be something that you're going to confess to the team as part of your like cleansing action, right? Because I don't want to be responsible for whatever the hell you've done. And I'm very often moderating, facilitating different business groups, and that kind of thing. And we talk about confidentiality and that kind of thing. But look, if you committed a massive tax fraud, I don't want to know about that. Don't tell me that.
Right.
Or some bank or some other kind of thing like that. Please don't give me that, because then that puts me in a position. If you want to talk to me about the failure of your leadership, about things that are really relevant in that place, by the same token, like the thing that we're hearing about right now, look, I don't care your thoughts and feelings about vaccinations, right? I have strong thoughts and feelings about vaccinations. It's very topical today. You and I, neither of us are epidemiologists, so I don't really want to hear it. And it's not going to be a productive conversation right now for us to have that. The same is true of our politics. Now, we could go have a beer and talk about that just as a general, like, human shooting the shit kind of thing. But it's not helpful in many cases to talk about, certain things like that, religion, politics, etc.
I love this. I've been dealing with like how transparent do I be my whole life. I'm a fairly public figure and I teach transparency. And I used to think I can't get up on stage and teach about transparency if I'm not sharing everything. And I've come to my own reasons for not sharing, but you just gave me a new one. The other person might feel responsible, or they might have a reaction or a ride that they don't want to take about that. So either choose not to share it, or perhaps you can set some context and say, by the way, I want to share something. Here's why I want to share it. And you don't have to do anything with it. I don't need to be rescued. I'm totally fine. I'm just sharing it so you know more about me. Like, there might be some ways to do it. But hide, I just wrote it down because someone said it to me recently and it keeps coming up. Hide nothing does not mean share everything. We have a right to privacy. There's certain things that are appropriate. Bill, I'm loving this. What are some of the other... Go ahead.
Just watch in this world, right? There's a phrase that comes up a lot that a lot of people are like, I'm just going to speak my truth.
Yes.
That's actually on some levels really good, but it's also on some levels, depending on how you're using that phrase and interpreting that phrase, a completely self-absorbed bunch of nonsense. So speak your truth if what you need to say is relevant, but if you're just unloading your opinions on people, that's not very helpful, right? If you're holding back and you're being inauthentic, you're hiding the truth and saying or omitting to say something really relevant. But if you're just mouthing your opinions, dumping on people, that is dumping, right? That's dropping your stuff on me.
Agreed. Yeah, I had a client whose mother recently said to her, they were talking about a painting that my client had painted years ago. And the mother said, oh, I don't like that painting. I never have. No profit in that. No upside to sharing that. It wasn't even asked for her opinion. So I think that'd be a good example of when not to say something. And you said something earlier that I wrote down, and I want to double click on that too. You said, like, when you're trying to work out, is this something I should say? Is this something you are hungry to say? I love that. Is there something in you that's driving you to want to express this, to want to say it? Or is it just, I don't know, I hate that painting, or, I don't find you very attractive, when it's just not even needed at all. But is it something you're hungry to say? And another thing I wrote down after listening to you was, a good question is fear stopping me? Is that the thing that's stopping me? Now, if it is, I could see we could even go a little deeper. Is that valid? And should that stop me? Like, yes, maybe the person will get really upset and quit, or maybe I'll lose my wife, or maybe I'll go to prison. Like, yeah, maybe check it out. But if it's really just the kind of fear we're used to in our society, where something really bad is probably not going to happen, it's just I'm going to feel awkward and uncomfortable, and you're hungry to say it, then let's go ahead and do it. I just thought of I've got a housemate here, and he had a fight at 1 a.m. with his partner, and very loud and aggressive and noisy, and it's not good for my nervous system for that kind of thing to happen. And the next day he said, I promise it won't happen again. But I did not feel complete. And what I wanted to say was, okay, just be double clear though. I can forgive that once, I can't forgive it twice. If it did happen again, you'd be out straight away, no 30 days notice or anything like that. I wanted to say that, but the part of my brain's like, no, you're going to make it worse. You could trigger him. He's already said it's not going to happen again. But it was such a part of my self-expression and my truth and my boundary setting, and I would have kicked myself if it happened again and I had not warned him about it. That'd be on me. So I'm curious what you think about that. Was that the kind of example where no, you should just shut up?
Did you tell him it better not happen again?
In the end, I spent 6 hours trying to work out the best language, and I tried to get him to agree to a meeting. He didn't want to agree to a meeting, and finally I sent a text message, and I did communicate it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we do that kind of thing, all of us, all the time. Not have big blowout fights. Some do and some don't. But we commonly say something happens, and then we say, oh, that'll never happen again. And that's like a polite sort of a dismissal of something, but in truth, almost nobody believes it, right?
Right.
You didn't really believe it in that moment.
No.
And I think things are off for that. One of them is very likely that person doesn't have any appreciation for what it was like for you to experience the other side of that. So, and if they do, you didn't hear that they knew what it was like for you. So they said, you said, or they said, it came up, you were talking about what happened and that you didn't like it. But did you get any sense that they really got what it was like for you to be in the presence of that?
Actually, surprisingly, in this case, I did. Because I wanted to have a meeting, and he wrote back, look, I know you hate noise, I know this, I know whatever. He didn't get the full impact, but he really did a pretty good job. But he didn't know the consequence if it happened again. So I'm thinking he does not have all the information. He needs the information, and then he's going to choose whatever he's going to do. So that's what kept pushing me to make sure he had all the data.
That's one, is actually attempting to get the impact. When you or somebody else with you actually tries to understand, whether they get it or not, what it was like, one, there's a lot more ability to communicate. Now we can hear it. And then the other thing is they say it'll never happen again. And it's like a disposable thing, but they haven't said how they're going to manage that. So we don't necessarily believe it. Hey, I'll never let that happen again. I'll never be late again. Whatever. You're like, yeah, bullshit. Because you don't even know why you were late to begin with. You don't even know why, like, you just did something and it's not the first time it's happened. It's not the last time it's happened. You said it won't happen again, but for sure it's going to happen again.
Right.
And now all there is like this consequence, like I'm going to kick you out. And then there will be a debate that you'll have about whether it rose to the level of that. But if the person hasn't dealt with the root cause of why something happened the way that it happened, it hasn't designed anything different, then for sure it's going to happen again.
Right. So the word that's coming up for me is empowerment here. I wasn't feeling completely empowered in it. I felt partially empowered. But you brought up some really good things. Had he said, this is what caused it, I've made changes to address the root cause so that won't happen again. If it ever gets close to this is what I will do. And if it does happen again, this is what I will pay as a penalty, for example, just to show you my commitment that this really matters to me. That would be super advanced empowerment to me. That would have me go, Holy smoke. Oh, you totally got this. You're on top of this. I don't have to do a thing. That would be awesome.
So take it to a non-human realm, which is interesting. Like take the analogy of uh, instead of being irrational, illogical human beings, we were a system, a complex system like a rocket ship. And the rocket, with every good intention, started to take off and then blew up. And then the rocket's manager, Elon Musk, stands before the world and says, "I'm really sorry that it blew up and created a thing that blew out your windows and like that kind of thing. And for the loss of investor money or whatever else, and just trust me, it'll never happen again." And then they really worked with intention on doing the next rocket the same way, but being really careful to try to not have it blow up. But it blew up again because they didn't stop and go, "Wait, why did it blow up?" Why did the first one blow up? And that's what we do as a lot as human beings, that we don't tend to do, like on the rocket side of things. The system blows up more often. We stop and we look at, okay, wait, what valves failed or leaked, or where did this thing, let's figure out and design out this. But with ourselves in our lives, we don't tend to stop and do any forensic analysis, figure it out and design it out and then practice it out and build it out so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, that's great. This is reminding me of I was about to do an interview and I reached out to my co-author and I said, "Do you have any last minute questions you can send me?" And then I got lost in prep for the interview and I started the interview. And then later on, I got a message from her and said, "Did you use my questions?" I said, "Oh, no, I didn't see them in time." And she said, "Well, did you check? You said this was time sensitive." So I dropped everything I was doing. I sent you the stuff within like 60 seconds. And she felt disempowered. Clear, of course she should. And I was like, wow. And I went backwards and I'm like, where did that break down? And I realized if I'm going to send something and I need a time sensitive answer, I have to set my alarm for 2 minutes to check. Yeah. So 2 minutes check. Did she respond? No. Okay, now I'm in the interview. That's a system. And so I think I shared that with her. And if I didn't, that's something I could do now, so that because I realized I did drop a ball and I wanted to work out how so it didn't happen again.
So this, by the way, is in the third of the 4 areas
Oh,
of
good.
the Leadership Flywheel. This is the world of planning, but planning for people and teams, where we want to think about the interdependencies and how we affect each other and how we revise things in the face of breakdowns.
Oh, yeah, this is good. I got this big time from Landmark. How do you empower people? And so how do you track down a breakdown, acknowledge it? I imagine that's one of the big steps. Okay, this was a breakdown. Here's how it happened. Here's my commitment, and here's how I'm going to demonstrate it. Powerful. I love the second area, which is engagement. You talked about getting people to yes, and you said that they say yes and that they take action, which reminds me of the Landmark distinction enrollment. Love that. What are the other 2 areas before I let you go?
So there's inspiring, the first one, which is leaving people in a positive emotional state. We do this by sharing a vision for the company, for the project or whatever it is. The second one is engagement. We're getting people to say yes and take action. And the third one is the planning piece. The fourth one is about coaching. The point of coaching is to keep people in the game. And with coaching, we loop back on the other parts of the flywheel, remind them of what they were inspired by and what they said yes to. And we look back and replan, and then that brings back around the flywheel.
And this fourth one is called coaching?
Coaching, yeah. So inspiring, engaging, planning, and coaching.
Great. So the coaching sounds like that's where it becomes iterative. It's an iterative step. We already inspired them. We already engaged the person. We already planned, and then maybe things slipped a little bit and we want to go back and re-presence.
None of those things is one and done. None of those things is forever. All of them need attending to over time, and none of them goes as planned.
Right. I'm going to forget what inspired me. At times I might forget what I committed to and need a little reminder since I'm not Bill Gallagher. So yeah, I could see how.
Especially if you're Bill Gallagher.
Right. Bill, this is amazing stuff. I got a feeling if we went for 6 hours, we'd keep on coming up with just really powerful. You'd keep on coming up with really powerful stuff for our audience. Is there anything else you want to say before I ask where people can find out more about you?
I know we've talked about a lot of stuff that we've touched on before. I work with people on growing their businesses, and we use the tool set from the Scaling Up framework that's built around growing companies. So it's a best of framework for growing companies. But the piece that I put particular focus on is the leadership aspect, the person leading a team or the overall company. How do they need to evolve their leadership? What are the essential disciplines that they've got to get good at? And how do those work together so that they keep getting the people, strategy, execution, and cash right?
So, listeners, if you are a leader of a team or a company and you want to scale, you want to do better, and you also have a vested interest in who you know yourself to be, if you want that to be greater than it is now, then go and work with Bill Gallagher. Where can people find you, Bill?
So I'm at scalingcoach.com. That's my website, my brand, like that, scalingcoach.com.
Great. And what's the call to action at that site? What's the best way for them to?
Well, they can start off like listening to our podcast. They can read the book. They can do a workshop with me. There's a lot of kinds of things that they can do. I don't actually work with that many companies that I actually coach. Is usually only about 10 or 11 at a time. So it's a fairly small number, but they can start to use some of the tools. In total, I touch thousands of companies a year through all of the different things that we do. But that website's a great place to start.
All right, you heard it here, listeners. Scalingcoach.com. Go and get some of the tools of the great Bill Gallagher. Bill, thanks for being on the show. You've been listening to Extraordinary Focus with David Wood. Now, to achieve way more in less time, to double your business and your impact in the world, and to be an even more extraordinary entrepreneur and human, make sure you get your gift basket. It includes a cheat sheet to double your focus, a short video to implement the steps, and a free focus audit to identify the #1 focus leak in your business and how to plug it. To get all 3 of these goodies, just go to myfocusgift.com. If you've gotten value out of this episode, tell your friends. And nothing says keep up the good work, David, like a review, which helps us climb in the rankings and reach more listeners. Now, let's be extraordinary.